were sleeping.
Yes. Such a problem, right? All right, so happy day. Today is a holiday.
I make and ready 20 pieces.
But today's a holiday.
Which one?
Oh, now this is sad.
You were telling me.
This is sad. I even brought a picture in to help you remember. I know it's an abacussis, which is hard to see from a distance. You can take a look at it later. Today is Yom Yerushalayim. You should have gone for it. You should have gone. Don't hesitate next time. Yom Yerushalayim.
I thought it was last week.
No, I announced it on Shabbat to let people know that it was coming this week.
Right, when Trump was there.
And exactly right. So, but today itself is Yom Yerushalayim.
Okay.
What is Jerusalem Day? Is it just the day when we say, yay, Jerusalem?
Celebration of the reunification.
All right, so it's the celebration of the reunification of the city, which in and of itself is a little bit of a misnomer, because the city itself is always whole. It's just a question of where people draw lines. Various politicians and international groups draw the lines. So in 1967, 50 years ago, so this is our Yovel, this is our Jubilee, Jerusalem was in the hands of the Jordanians. And by Jerusalem, we're talking about the Old City, the heart of Jerusalem, the walled city where the Temple Mount stands, where the Western Wall is. That was in the hands of the Jordanians. And it had been in their hands since 1948 until 1967. After 1948, they closed access to Jerusalem, the Old City, for Jews from Israel. And they stationed their troops there. And they would fire at Israelis from the Old City, knowing that we would not fire back because we wouldn't want to damage the Old City. And they bulldozed and destroyed many Jewish homes, many Jewish synagogue sites, and other things of importance in the Old City during those 20 years of their occupation, which I should point out, the international community didn't care one whit. 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel fought a very hard battle because they limited their use of types of weapons in order to secure the old city of Jerusalem so that it could be part of Israel once more. And that happened on this day, 50 years ago. So we're going to be studying, yes, about Torah, but we're also going to be handling the question of what position Jerusalem has in our understanding of Judaism. Good introduction?
Yes.
We're all set? Okay. In that case, let me surprise you then by getting to page 783. This is chapter 4 of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. And we're going to begin on verse 5. So chapter 4, verse 5 of the book of Numbers, also known as page 783 if you're in the Eitz Chaim Chumash. And we're just at the first full paragraph on the page. And I need a volunteer. Our usual volunteers aren't here. Bueller? No one wants to. All right, Michael, thank you.
Even though I'm choking and can't breathe. At the breaking of camp.
Okay, pause there.
Which chapter you say?
We're at chapter 4, verse 4. Verse 5. Verse 5. At the breaking of the camp. All right, so this is introducing a question that you may or may not have considered at some point in your past, which is when we set up the camp of the Israelites as they go through the wilderness. Actually, let me just move this. We get instructions. And the instructions are that you have the tabernacle, the Mishkan court set up in the middle with the Mishkan itself in the center, or not quite the center, and the altar and other things, and then the screened off courtyard around it. And then you have the blocks of tribes that surround it, right? And that's earlier in Bamidbar. If you want to know where the tribes are and how they've distributed, that's earlier in this Torah portion. And when the tabernacle is set up, and you have the section here where the Ark of the Covenant is, just make my best little scribble. Someone's buzzing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just making sure it wasn't like a pacemaker or something.
No, more important,
It's on hummingbird mode.
society.
When that is set up, who gets to walk in there? Aaron, right? That's it. The high priest, Kohen Gadol, right? But before they set it up, who gets to walk there? Before they set up the camp, when it's just empty wilderness, anybody. It's dirt,
Okay.
right? It's dirt,
Okay.
and then they bring the ark and they put the ark down, and then they put the tent around it, and now it is a no-go area for anybody but the Kohen Gadol. And as we're going to see, we then have to deal with the question of, okay, when I take down my tents and you take down your tents and we all start marching, how do we take this down? Right? Because before we put it up, it was just dirt. Now it's the Holy of Holies. How do I pack that up if there's limits on who can go where and do what? And so that's what we're dealing with right here. So at the breaking of the camp, when it's time to pack up the camp and move on, how do we handle it? All right, Michael, now I'll let you read a few more words.
At the breaking of camp, Aaron and his son shall go in and take down the screening curtain and cover the ark of the pact with it.
All right, so what's happening?
Aaron, because Aaron is the only one that can go in, then he has to go first to take down the screen.
No.
Exactly. No, they don't take down the screen. What do they do with the screen?
They cover the ark.
Exactly. So they take the parochet, the screen that is down here, and they put it over the ark. So as they take down the screen, the ark is still shielded. And as they put the screen over, the curtain over the ark is still shielded in the Holy of Holies, even though the Holy of Holies is now being disassembled. Make sense?
Yeah.
It's a very clever way of doing it, but what do you expect?
They shall lay a covering of dolphin skin over it and spread a cloth of pure blue on top, and they shall put its poles in place.
All right, and then they put the poles into the sockets along the side of the ark, getting it ready for being carried. So it's been covered, and then you have this other layer, probably not dolphin skin, that's a whole nother class of what type of skin is being referred to, but it's definitely a heavy hide. This would make it waterproof and more durable in the elements, and you're getting it ready for travel. Okay, who thought that packing would be so involved, right? But this is really dealing with a very important question, because when I need to pack up my clothes to go on vacation, there's nothing special happening. But when there's a holy spot and I need to pack it up, I need to pack it up without breaking the sanctity, breaking the holiness of the site.
So, question, if Aaron is standing on the outside, if you will, of it,
Right,
and putting it over,
right.
he's not the only one that could stand on the outside.
Correct. In this part
So
of
the
the,
sons could do that without him.
right, exactly. Yes, the Kohanim out here are allowed to be in that part of the Mishkan. It's only in here that they can't. So they take it down, and you need more than one guy to then go forward and put it over the ark, put the poles in. Now it's ready to go.
So once it's the brook that is over the ark, then his sons are allowed to be
Exactly
in
right.
the Holy of Holies,
Right.
even though the Holy of Holies is gone. So to speak.
Well, exactly right. The Holy of Holies is now not
It's
quite there
isolated, right?
because they have taken that, and what they have done is use that parochet to isolate the ark further. So now the ark is isolated under the parochet rather than in the room. And so,
radiation.
if thinking of radiation shielding helps, like a big lead blanket, that's a fine way to imagine it. That the holiness is around this, and as you put the parochet over, you put the holiness into a smaller area. That now you're allowed to walk around it and put the poles in and all of that. So that's a good metaphor, only a metaphor, but it's a good metaphor. Okay, so let's keep with the packing.
Over the table of display, they shall spread a blue cloth. They shall place upon it the bowls, the ladles, the jars, and libation jugs, and the regular bread shall rest upon it. They shall spread over these a crimson cloth, which they shall cover with a covering of dolphin skin, and they shall put the poles in place.
Right, remember there was the table as well, and they put the a cloth over it, they put the items on it, then they cover that as well, and now it's easy to lift. Oh, wait, do you have pictures?
Yeah. That means
The book has pictures. That's very cool. Right, so you can see how the table here, this is probably for the lesson panim, if I'm not mistaken, makes it much easier to carry and move on. The important thing being that the moving of all of this is important. We're not camping in one spot forever, so we have to have a system that doesn't treat it like we're just moving my regular tent, that treats it with sanctity, but also lets me move it. Because otherwise, once you put the tent down, you'd be stuck there forever. Right? So there needs to be this process. All right.
Then they shall take a blue cloth and cover the lampstand for lighting with its lamps, its tongs, and its fire pan,
Right, that's the menorah.
as well as all the oil vessels that are used in its service. They shall put it and all its furnishings into a covering of dolphin skin, which they shall then place on a carrying frame.
Okay, so there's actually a special frame for the menorah. It doesn't have any holes on it itself. It doesn't have any sockets, no rings. So they have a wooden frame that it would be put on. Keep going.
Next, they shall spread a blue cloth over the altar of gold and cover it with a covering of dolphin skin, and they shall put its poles in place. They shall take all the service vessels with which the service in the sanctuary is performed, put them into a blue cloth, and cover them with a covering of dolphin skin, which they shall then place on a carrying frame. They shall remove the ashes from the copper altar and spread a purple cloth over it. Upon it they shall place all the vessels that are used in its service, the fire pans, the flesh hooks, the scrapers, and the basins. All the vessels of the altar, and over it they shall spread a covering of dolphin skin, and they shall put its poles in place.
All right, so for the altar itself, they also have to carry that, and this is the process. A lot of stuff. I mean, this was not a simple thing to move around and break camp.
We didn't have any ox carts, right?
Thank you for the next paragraph. Right, so now that we've got everything packed up, now that the Mishkan itself, all of the holy items within it are safe, secured, and covered, now,
When Aaron and his sons have finished covering the sacred objects and all the furnishings of the sacred objects at the breaking of camp, only then shall the Kohathites come and lift them, so that they do not come in contact with the sacred objects and die. These things in the tent of meeting shall be the pilgrimage of the Kohathites.
all right, yeah, which is different than Kohen. Make sure we got the two different words here. This is a sub-clan, and that's their responsibility.
I think Levine, isn't it?
Right, they're a group of Levi'im, right? They're one of the families within the Levi'im, and it's their job to schlep. So no, we don't have ox carts for this. When we read in Shmini a little while ago in the Haftarah, we found out if you put this on a cart, bad things can happen. Exactly, it can kill people. So instead, it's meant to be carried. But these people don't have the ability to go in and pack everything up. They can only do the carrying once the Kohanim have taken care of the actual packing. Make sense? Okay, so we don't need to read any more of the Torah for the moment, although certainly read the rest. So everything has been packed up. The spot where the Holy of Holies was. What is its status now?
Still holy, kind of.
Really?
It's just open land.
Do they leave like a little fence around it?
No.
Right, so
It's the same holiness like when Moses met Hashem on Mount Sinai, and Hashem told him, take your shoes off because you're standing on the holy ground.
So was the
It's still
ground,
holy ground
is it?
until they completely move, I think.
Okay, so let's say that. Then everybody packs up. When these guys here, let's say these all move, right? They all march. When this part of the camp moves,
Cannot
does it go like that?
no,
Or does it go like that?
no, I think.
Once the Mishkan is gone, it's dirt. Right? The ground is no longer holy. If it were holy, I do a quick logic test. If it were holy, then they would have had to have left markers so that for all time, no one would walk there. And there are numerous moments where in Judaism, someone will say this ground is holy, but it's holy at the moment. It's not holy in the dirt. Yes.
I was just thinking about the Temple Mount, but.
Well, that's where we're headed.
Oh.
Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, presents a particular question then. What is the status of Jerusalem? And what is the status of where the temple stood in Jerusalem? Because this, a moving tent, and we're going to be going to different places, and even though the Mishkan stayed in some places for many, many years, it could be moved at any time. That leaves us with this notion that the holiness is only holy, or rather the holiness is only there because the ark is there, because the Mishkan is there. And if you take away the Mishkan, if you take away the ark, the holiness would go with it. But when it comes to Yerushalayim, when it comes to the city of Jerusalem, when it comes to Har Habayit, when it comes to the Temple Mount, is that also true? That's what we're going to discuss. Well, that's part of what we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss a number of things about Judaism, and about Jerusalem, but that's one of the main topics. Okay, so with that in mind, Michael, if you would still read us the first teaching from Tanhuma.
Sir, the land of Israel sits at the center of the world. Jerusalem is in the center of the land of Israel. The temple is in the center of Jerusalem. The sanctuary is in the center of the temple. The ark is in the center of the sanctuary. And the foundation stone out of which the world was founded is in front of the sanctuary. Okay,
so the basic picture that we're getting here is one of circles, right? You have a world, and Israel is in the center of the world, right? And in Israel, Jerusalem is in the center. And within Jerusalem, the temple is in the center. And within the temple, the actual sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, is in that. And within that, the rock from which the world was made is found in the center. Make sense? Any problems? Are we uncomfortable with the idea of Israel being in the center of the world?
What do you mean, geographical center?
Yeah.
Could be. Any place could be.
Thank you. Right? It's technically true.
Depends on your perspective.
Right? If you have a ball, point to me the center of the surface of the ball. Every point is the center, right? I mean, you can see it a bit more easily. Imagine this is a perfect circle, and I didn't do that. Imagine this is a perfect circle. If I said, where is the start of the circle? Right. That could be the start, that could be the start, that any point is the start. They're all equal. That's what makes a circle a circle. And when you have a sphere, it's the same thing. Any point on a sphere is the start as a sphere. It's the center of the surface of the sphere. So the idea that Israel is on the center of the world is absolutely geographically true. But do you think that this midrash is talking about geography and geometry? Is that the purpose of the midrash, of the teaching? No, it's not. It's not really about geometry. It's good to know that geometrically it's kind of true, but geographically, or rather spiritually, what they're talking about is that our orientation, the way we look at the world, should have at its center Israel, Jerusalem, the temple, and the idea of, through its sanctuary, the stone from which the earth was made. Why? Why would that be a useful spiritual thing in mind? I made this kind of looking like this on purpose. Think of it like a target, right? Well, I missed the target with my last arrow. I'm no artist. Right, the idea here from this midrash is that if you orient your mind about the world in this pattern, then you are guiding your mind not just from the whole world to Israel, which is good, but you're also guiding your mind to Jerusalem, which is even better, which is giving you the insight into the temple, which is excellent, to the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, the purpose of the temple, which is unusual because you might have thought the purpose of the temple was the altar, were the sacrifices. But that's not saying the altar as the center. Instead, the altar is over there and the sanctuary is the center. And why is it the center? Because within it is the stone from which the world was made. So what does it mean by this is the foundation stone of the world?
Mount Moriah.
Well, it's definitely called Mount Moriah, but it's built off another midrash, that this is the first point that was dry land. That when God made the world and separated the world from the earth from the waters, that this was point number one. And what this is telling us, again, is not about history or geology. What this is trying to tell us is that the center of the foundation of the Holy of Holies, of the temple, of Jerusalem, of Israel, of the world, is the idea that God created all of this. And that the whole structure of Israel, Jerusalem, temple, a sanctuary, altar, the foundation stone, is all meant to draw us towards that truth. And that truth is meant to flow out towards us, of this notion that we are connected to creation at this point. And our realization, our awareness should be heightened when we're thinking about this structure. So somebody who thinks about Israel as just being dirt is missing the point. Someone who thinks about the temple as just being a big building is missing the point. There is a lesson in the very construction, the orientation of our mind that is being driven by this theory, this teaching. Make sense? Ish? All right. Let's see how far we go, though. Exodus Rabbah, if you would continue.
Rabbi Eliezer says the Shekhinah did not depart from the sanctuary, for although it was laid waste, it still retained its holiness.
Okay, so let's make sure we understand that. He's saying that when the sanctuary was destroyed, when the Holy of Holies was destroyed by the Romans, the Shekhinah, God's presence, didn't leave. Now that's different than what we were talking about with the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle. In the Mishkan, in the tent, when the tent moved, the Shekhinah went with it. God's presence, our ability to perceive God's presence journeyed on. But here, what he's saying is that when the temple was wiped out by the Romans, God's presence is still there, which would imply about the land and holiness and such.
It's permanently holy.
It's permanently holy, right? But this is an area, unlike the wilderness of Sinai, this is an area where the Shekhinah stays to this day. And Rav Acha has a build on that.
Rav Acha said the divine presence will never depart from the western wall, as it is said, behold, he stands behind our wall.
Okay, so that's taken from Song of Songs, which they're using as a metaphor between ourselves and God. But it will never depart from the western wall. Where's the western wall?
Along the retaining wall,
Hmm?
on the west side, the retaining wall on the west side.
Well,
In the picture.
it's in the picture. All right. If someone could show me on the picture, where's the western wall?
Okay.
All right.
That is the west.
Okay. So here's the problem with how we read this section from Exodus Rabbah and how we look at the modern world and why we misunderstand what this rabbi is saying. What?
Robinson's Arch is on the western wall.
Absolutely. It is on the wall that we call the Western Wall. You're absolutely right. And we are wrong. Okay. So,
I'm right, we're all wrong.
yep.
Works for me.
Well, you know what? It's okay for you to be right and for us to be wrong. Then that way it's shared. It's a shared error and one that we don't think about. So this is the whole Temple Mount, right? Pardon, not drawn to scale. I'm not an architect. Just work with me. We're looking down on it like a satellite. And over here, this is the area that people call Hakotel, right? The Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall. It used to be called when I was growing up more commonly. And this is where people go and they put prayers in the cracks. They pray there at the wall. It's one of the touchstones. one of the touchstones of Jewish culture and Jewish faith and Jewish history. And one that was in the news very prominently just in the last day when President Trump was visiting, that this is what most people think of as being the Western Wall. But it isn't. It isn't the actual Western Wall that the rabbis are talking about in the Midrash. Where is the Western Wall that they're talking about? Well, there used to be a courtyard, and inside the courtyard, to that wall, there was the temple, right? That's looking down. You can see the picture much nicer than my drawing on the three-dimensional drawing. And in that, this area in the back, right, that was the Holy of Holies. That was where the Ark was kept. That was what was considered to be the most sacred point. And it's that, remember when we were doing our circles, that's in the middle of the circle, and then there was a rock in the middle of that upon which the Ark of the Covenant rested when the first temple, at least, was built there. If I have my compass, right, north, south, east, and west, where's the Western Wall?
The back wall of the temple.
Exactly, right here. This is the real Western Wall. It was the back wall of the temple. Now, why would that be the most sacred? Well, we're going to do a little bit more on that, but think about it. Right here, this was a curtain, so there was no eastern wall, right? And the Western Wall, therefore, was the unique point at the very end. That was the backstop, if you will, of the temple itself. That was the terminus of the temple, and it was the area that we could be closest to the Holy of Holies, right? Because over here, we didn't get, if you were just a regular Jewish guy, you were way over here when you were normally coming to visit the temple. If you wanted to be closest to the temple, to the Holy of Holies, if you look at the map, the closest you could get would be coming around behind towards that Western Wall. That was the nearest you could get to the Holy of Holies as a regular Jewish person. If you were a high priest, or certainly if you were a regular priest as well, you can get a lot closer by doing the services. But for most of us, it didn't work like that. Most of us, we were stuck way outside. Nowadays, well, I shouldn't say that. Historically, until the modern times, the closest we could get to the Holy of Holies was here, down at the bottom of the retaining wall that held up the dirt upon which the temple was built. And so this became called the Western Wall because it's on the west. And it was important because it was still the closest we could get, because we weren't allowed to go up on the top except on Tisha B'Av and other times during the ancient days. And so this became the focus of how we would express our longing, our yearning for a redemption and restoration of Israel. And it took on the name Western Wall because it was a wall and it was in the west, but it wasn't really the Western Wall that was being talked about in the Midrash. Make sense? Okay, so when someone asks you where the Western Wall is, it's on the Temple Mount, not on the ground below the retaining wall of the Temple Mount. But there's a problem in the modern world, which is, if you look at that lovely picture of what it used to look like during Herod's time, can I go up there now? Is that a loaded question?
Lots of reasons.
If you're a Jew, you can't.
Well, yes, you can, actually. If you're a Jew, but not a member of the government, then you are allowed to go up onto the Temple Mount by
Not free.
by Israeli law, right? But by Israeli law, you're not allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. So if you go up to the Temple Mount as a tourist, it's allowed. If you go up to the Temple Mount as somebody who wants to pray, then you are thrown out. You're not allowed to go up there
By secular law.
by secular law. By secular law. But let's take another imagination. Let's imagine that there were no other people involved. It was only Jewish people. Right? There was no issue of Muslims, no issue of the world, international opinion, no issue of violence. Just us, right? Just us. Just imagine, because we're not there, but just imagine. If there was not any other group that was causing trouble, if there was not a secular law that made pray, not pray, and all of that, would we be allowed to go up to the Temple Mount?
Yes.
Yes? But what about the Holy of Holies?
Yeah. Up to a point you can go.
Okay. So the basic idea would be that you would have a sort of imaginary cushion that you would stay outside of, because somewhere around here is the Holy of Holies. We don't know exactly, because we've never been allowed to do archaeology and see where the Holy of Holies would have been. But we have a pretty good estimate when you can take a map of the Temple Mount and you know what the buildings look like, and we know what the other archaeology outside tells us. We have a pretty good idea of where the temple was, and therefore where the Holy of Holies was. And one would stay away from that because, as we saw, the idea is the Shekhinah is still there. It's still the Holy of Holies, even though we're not looking at a temple built around it. Again, different than the Mishkan. But the rest of it, we could go. And indeed, for many, many hundreds and thousands of years, Jews did. On Tisha B'Av, during the Roman times, the Romans would allow us on the one day to go up to the Temple Mount, so we could go up there and be sad, and go up there and cry, because of our sadness for the destruction of the temple. And there were other times when Jews would also go up, again, for prayer and for sadness, and they would go up to the other areas. They just wouldn't go to where the Holy of Holies had been. And so, yes, technically, if there were no other issues, going up and praying on the Temple Mount would be permitted, with a little bit of a probably not there kind of feeling.
The Rabbanut will take care of fencing the area.
Well,
Such a way.
actually, the Rabbanut doesn't want people going up on the Temple Mount at all.
Now,
At the moment, and not just for the secular law, they also have argued that it's not appropriate for Jews to go up to the Temple Mount until Mashiach comes. So they don't want us to go up to there at all, even if there was no one else around. But most of Jewish law, until the modern day, said that yes, you could go up with a cushion of where you would go, of being careful where you walked. So apparently the temple, and the holiness is still affixed, it's still important. And it is something that we can still feel, which might make you think then that Jerusalem really is the center of the world. It's the navel, the belly button of the world, right? From which everything has grown, and which the presence of God, the Shekhinah, feeds the world, if you will, with spiritual life. Which is why we're going to read from Jeremiah a very different feeling about Jerusalem. All right, you ready to read your best angry Jeremiah voice? Jeremiah was almost always angry.
This is the Lord's message to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, stand at the gate of the Lord's house.
That means the temple.
Teach this message at the gate. Hear the message from the Lord, all you people of the nation of Judah. All you who come through these gates to worship the Lord, hear this message.
All right, so make sure we know the timeline. Jeremiah lived before the Babylonian destruction, before the destruction of the first temple, but after the destruction of the northern tribes of Israel. So he lived after the Assyrian conquest of the north, but before the Babylonian conquest of the south. And during his time, he saw corruption and immorality everywhere.
The Lord, all-powerful, the God of Israel, says, change your lives and do good things. If you do this, I will let you live in this place.
All right. Probably one of the simplest summaries of almost every teaching in the Torah, right? Which is change and live your life properly. And if you do, then you will enjoy peace and prosperity. That's the implication.
Don't trust the lies that some people say. They say, this is the temple of the Lord. The temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord.
Wait. That's a lie? Why would that be a lie? Huh. All right, hold that in the back of your mind because I want to let Jeremiah do his job. I'm not gonna. I don't want to short circuit him. But he's saying that people are lying by saying this is the temple, this is the temple, this is the temple. But we know it is the temple, and that's something. By the way, I should point out that there are people in the modern world who also lie and say that this wasn't the temple, that Jews have no connection to Jerusalem, which is also a lie. So I don't understand what the lie is, because this is the truth, right? We have a connection to the temple. This is the temple. This is the temple that we built for God. What's the problem here?
If you change your lives and do good things, I will let you live in this place. You must be fair to each other. You must be fair to strangers. You must help widows and orphans. Don't kill innocent people, and don't follow other gods, because they will only ruin your lives. If you obey me, I will let you live in this place. I give this land to your ancestors. I gave this land to your ancestors for them to keep forever.
All right. So he gives a little bit more detail about what it means to live a good life, or really most of this is what it means to live a not evil life. He's not setting the bar very high here, right? Don't kill innocent people. Okay, I think most of us can manage that. Apparently in his day, it was still a big problem. So he's still only talking about this good stuff that we should be doing. I don't see what this has to do with the temple until the next paragraph.
But you are trusting lies that are worthless. Will you steal and murder? Will you commit adultery? Will you falsely accuse other people? Will you worship the false god Baal and follow other gods that you have not known? If you commit these sins, do you think that you could stand before me in this house that is called by my name? Do you think you could stand before me and say we are safe? Just so you could do all these terrible things? This temple is called by my name. Is this temple nothing more to you than a hideout for robbers? I have been watching you. This message is from the Lord.
All right. What's Jeremiah's point?
You can't just talk the talk. You got to walk the walk.
Yeah.
Right. You can't just talk the talk, walk the walk, which means if you're an evil person here, don't think that coming here and offering a sacrifice makes everything okay. Right? That doesn't make it hunky-dory. Right? And then you leave and you go do evil and you come back and you go over here and you worship a different God and then you come here and you worship God. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. But there's still a notion of a lie that we're missing, that he hasn't quite made clear yet. He's still got this theme that we're being deceived. Because he says that it seems like people think that you can go be a robber and then you can come back to the temple as your hideout, right? As the place where you come back for safety. And then you go out and do horrible things and you come back to the temple for safety. And that notion of safety is what he has to try and disabuse people, right? He has to get them to change their mind about this idea of safety because it's hurting them right now.
You people of Judah, go now to the town of Shiloh. Go to the place where I first made a house for my name. People of Israel also did evil things. Go and see what I did to that place because of the evil they did. You people.
By the way, what would happen if they went and looked? What did Shiloh look like?
Destroyed.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
Right? The town wasn't there anymore. What's he trying to say?
This place might be destroyed.
Exactly right. Even though this is my house, even though this is where I've called my name, or had my name to be called, even though this is my centerpiece, if you will, of the focus of the world, of my presence, that will not protect you if you do evil. You can't hide in my house from the consequences of the bad that you have done. And he's going to drive that point home very clearly.
You people of Israel were doing all these evil things. The message is from the Lord. I spoke to you again and again, but you refused to listen to me. I called to you, but you did not answer. So I will destroy the house called by my name in Jerusalem. I will destroy the temple as I destroyed Shiloh. And that house in Jerusalem that is called by my name is the temple you trust in. I gave that place to you and to your ancestors. I will throw you away from me, just as I threw away all your brothers from Ephraim.
All right. Like I said, Jeremiah spends a lot of time being angry, but he's making a very, very powerful point here, which is when the temple stood, and even today in the mind of some people, the temple or Jerusalem seems so sacred, so special, that we could never imagine that God would allow anything bad to happen. And what Jeremiah is saying is, if you do bad things, the temple will not protect you. Right? God is willing to destroy the temple. God is willing to destroy the temple if necessary. It's not like, it'd be like saying, you know, you're over at someone's house and you're behaving terribly. And you say, well, the host isn't going to really do anything because he doesn't want his house to get hurt. And God is saying, no, I will burn my house to the ground if it gets you out and so you stop doing terrible things. Don't think you're safe just because you're in my house, because my house is not as important to me as what you do. Right? God is not like a king. God is not like a human being. A human being, we love our house, we love our property, we love our stuff more than we love how people behave. And God is saying, no, my house is nice. It's very helpful. It makes people understand Judaism and lets people have a connection to me. But if it's not working and if it's not helping and you're doing horrible things, and the only way I can teach you is by wiping out the house, I will do that. Don't think you're safe just because you're at the temple or just because you're in Jerusalem. Don't think God won't go there. God will. And we know, of course, Jeremiah was right, because shortly after he spoke, indeed, God did destroy Jerusalem, the temple, and our people went into exile for 70 years. Okay. So does that mean then that Jerusalem is nothing? Right, if God is willing to wipe out the temple, burn it to the ground, make the city ruins, does that mean God doesn't care about Jerusalem? Does that mean Jerusalem is just another city?
No.
Not exactly. Jerusalem is not an amulet. It's not a protective charm.
Right? It's not sanctuary.
Right. Well, it's not sanctuary for those who do evil. It absolutely is sanctuary for the righteous, but it isn't sanctuary for the evil. And that means you can't look at Jerusalem as being some magic lucky charm. As long as we have Jerusalem, everything's fine. Because as long as you use Jerusalem, meaning as long as you use Jerusalem to become closer to God and to understand Torah and to do all the things that he mentions, right? To be good to the orphans, be good to the strangers, help the widows, don't kill him. As long as you're doing those things, then Jerusalem is amazing and a miracle. But if you don't do these things, Jerusalem and the temple do nothing for you. And they're definitely not going to protect you. Right? It's not a lucky rabbit's foot. All right. But it does do some things. That is to say, it still has a purpose and a goal, which is why we're going to see from the Talmud, the next paragraph.
For you are not as yet come to the Menucha and to the Nachalah.
Right, so this is a line taken from Deuteronomy, right, where it says that we are still headed towards the land of Israel, but we haven't come to rest, we haven't come to our inheritance. And the rabbis, in typical fashion, they want to know why two words, right? Why not just say one word or the other word?
Rabbis taught Menucha alludes to Shiloh, the site of the Mishkan from Joshua's time, through the period of Judges, Nachalah to Jerusalem.
Right, and this is again a little brilliant insight by the historical insight by the sages, because the tabernacle, the Mishkan, was taken to Shiloh and it rested there for many, many years, but it wasn't the permanent place for it to rest. Instead, it was then later taken to Jerusalem, and in Jerusalem was the permanent resting place. That was the inheritance. Shiloh was Menucha, it was a resting place, but Yerushalayim, that's Nachalah, that is the true portion, that is the inheritance. Make sense? Again, trying to draw a distinction between the temporary places of the Mishkan and the permanent power of Jerusalem.
Song of Ascents of David. I was glad when they said to me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Our feet have been standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built as a city that is compact together, where the tribes go up, and the tribes of the Lord to the testimony of Israel to give thanks to the name of the Lord. For thrones are set there, Jerusalem, in judgment. The thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you.
May they prosper who love you. In English, we probably would say more literally, may they who love you prosper.
That's it. Peace to be within your walls, prosperity within your palaces. For the sake of my brethren and companions, I will now say, peace be within you. Because of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your good.
All right.
Shir Hamalot.
The Shir Malot, exactly. So this is Psalm 122. We often will say this on Shabbat. But notice the beautiful thing that David did, which was foretelling about the coming of the temple, but he already had the Mishkan there. How is this working? What is the nature of the relationship? Right? Is it the house of the Lord that's making the peace? Look at the order in the sentences. Right? Because of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your good. That sentence is wrong by the normal person's thought thinking. It should read, because of the house of the Lord our God, I will be given good. Right? Isn't God's temple supposed to do good for me? But instead, I am saying Jerusalem should have good because the temple is there. That's backwards. Right? I mean, the religion is supposed to be what I get out of it. I want the cash payoff. And yet David is saying, the man who was prevented from building the temple, by the way, that we should be praying for the welfare of Jerusalem rather than praying that Jerusalem benefit us. Right? We should be trying to help Jerusalem rather than looking what we get out of it. And that's a complete reversal of the natural human instinct.
Ask not what your country can do.
Ask not what your city can do for you, but what you can do for Jerusalem. It's exactly what he's saying. Right? It's not because Jerusalem has the temple, therefore it will do good for the people, but because Jerusalem is the seat of God's presence in the world and a place where we can connect to God unlike any other place, I should be seeking to do good for it. I should be protecting this amazing thing that we have.
So the temple is a tool, an amplifier.
An amplifier, a tool, it's a magnifying glass, a gravity well that allows us to pierce through our material universe into the spiritual more easily than anywhere else on earth. There's many different metaphors that have been used. But the basic point is that Jerusalem is special, and therefore we must protect it in order that we can continue to be able to use it for its purpose of connecting us with God. Not just because I have it, like my lucky rabbit's foot, I'm going to be blessed because it's there. It doesn't work that direction. We are Jerusalem's guardians more than Jerusalem guards us.
And not necessarily always by force of arms, but by doing a righteous life.
Well, if we look back at Jeremiah, I don't see anywhere in here where he said, have a bigger army. I didn't see anything in here where he said even do more sacrifices. What he said was all the stuff that was happening outside of the temple was what was wrong. And in fact, people seem to still be bringing sacrifices. But it's the living a Jewish life, a Torah life. That is the focus. That is the goal. And doing so with Jerusalem is an amplifier, a magnifier, whichever way you want to put it, is better than without. But it is because of us that it is better, not because of it, right? If we put nothing in of our own righteousness, if we put no goodness in, nothing is going to be coming out. And that means that it's our responsibility more than God. God will work with us, right? That's the brief. God is part of the covenant, the relationship. But we have to give with goodness and righteousness, and then Jerusalem will bounce it back out into the world 100 times over. And we can't just let Jerusalem do all the work, because it won't happen. It's just a building, special building, but it's our action first. All right, then just a couple little more tidbits to try and bring this home.
What part fell into the territory of Judah? Temple Mount, treasuries, and the courts. What part fell into the territory of Benjamin? The sanctuary, porch, and the house of the Holy of Holies. A triangular strip of land protruded, entering and leaving Benjamin's portion that connected to Judah's. And on that strip of land, the altar was built. The fathers, according to Rabbi Natan.
All right, so I'd love to see someone do a good map of this, but basically what they're trying to say is Jerusalem was shared by the tribe of Benjamin and Judah, right? The most powerful, famous, large tribe, and one of the smallest and least important of the tribes. And the idea being that there was land like that was Benjamin, and land like that was Judah, and that hold on a second, Benjamin should be more like that, and that, and that. And so this part where the altar was also Judah, that there was a little bit of a piece of Judah sticking over under the altar. So the altar was under Judah, but the Holy of Holies was under Benjamin. That right here on Jerusalem, on the Temple Mount itself, was a little bit of a microcosm of how the tribes were blended together, and the need for the tribes from biggest to smallest to be sharing this space. Jerusalem doesn't belong to just one group. It doesn't just belong to one person. It belongs to all of us, from greatest to least, as a shared inheritance. Make sense? You'll often find when you look at maps of the tribal allotments, when it comes to Jerusalem, it's a little fuzzy where Benjamin and Judah meet. And now you know why, because according to the Talmud at least, the border was not straight, which is why it's so funny when people talk about the modern question of Jerusalem and the Palestinians and the Israelis. And they say, well, you're going to have a border that's all weird shaped. Like, we've already done weird shaped borders. But we've done weird borders before. It's okay. We can manage weird borders. It may be weird. We do that. We're that kind of people. All right. Next.
They went on sounding the shofar in a sustained blast until they reached the gate which leads out to the east. When they reached the gate which goes out toward the east, they turned around toward the west, and they said, our fathers who were in this place turned with their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east, and they worshiped the sun toward the east. But as to us, our eyes are toward the Lord. Judah said. They said it a second time, we belong to the Lord, and our eyes are toward the Lord.
So you probably have heard that we face towards Jerusalem when we are praying. And when you're in Jerusalem, you face towards where the temple stood when you're praying. And what they're talking about is there was a procession, and when the people came onto the Temple Mount, and they came towards the gate at the east, rather than facing out in the east towards the sun and all of its glory, they deliberately turned their back on the east in order to face to the temple, and trying to say, we are not like our ancestors who once worshipped the sun, who worshipped idols. We instead worship only God, as symbolized by the temple. And again, by that concentric circle, as symbolized as the creator of all. Make sense?
Yeah.
Good. And then just one last little tidbit we need for Yom Yerushalayim to remember.
Someone who has not seen the beauty of Jerusalem has never seen a lovely city.
And this was stated by people who would have seen Rome, who would have seen Alexandria, who would have seen all the great cities of the ancient world. And yet they knew that Jerusalem was beautiful beyond compare. And it wasn't the most beautiful city just because it had the best architecture. Although Herod did a lot of fine architecture, Jerusalem was the loveliest city because of what it represented. It was something that was not only special in our eyes for us, but it was something that in our eyes was special for the whole world. And hopefully the world will eventually come to recognize that we have been trying to share the message of Jerusalem to the whole world for 3,000 years. They usually haven't liked hearing the message, but perhaps they will hear it soon, and we'll be able to let Jerusalem be the truly lovely city that it needs to be, so that the whole world will be able to appreciate that and will come closer to understanding that truth, that it truly is the center of the world. Good? Good.
So what about the picture